So in Maya, we do have a lot of really, really amazing tools and selection. So selections and I would say modeling tools are probably two of the most important sort of features. So again, I use a lot of my sort of shortcuts. Control D is duplicate. So if you duplicate once and move or rotate, it puts it off in space. If you go, Shift D. Sorry, one sec. It's a little weird. If you make a duplicate, so that's Control D, and then move right away, you have to go Shift D, which will make a bunch of copies with the offset. So that's really good for mass duplication. I often will just do that through File, Edit, Duplicate, and Duplicate with Transform. So that's the shortcut right there, Shift D. Again, it's a very, very touchy. So as soon as you kind of click something else or move your camera a little bit, it can actually sometimes break that. So sometimes you have to undo the copy and the move, or the copy and rotate, or whatever it might be, and redo it, and then do Shift D. So it's a little bit touchy. And make sure you don't leave a copy on top of itself, because sometimes you will undo, but you don't undo enough and you're still leaving like duplicates behind. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's very sensitive. So again, it's Control D, move the object in whatever direction, and then Shift D to duplicate with transform. Now, like I said, that also applies. So if I Control D, rotate, and then Shift D, see that? Yes, you can do multiple rotations and stuff, but I usually wind up doing that through the duplicate special. So there are options if you go into duplicate special. I don't know where my options window is going, but I see. Sorry, it's off on another screen, so I have to bring it over here. So you can actually say, okay, let's rotate this 30 degrees. We'll have it translate up, I don't know, 20 units and over 20 units. And I'll do like, I don't know, 15 copies for now. Okay. So if you apply that, you get this. So yeah, you can build some really cool stuff. The only problem I have with this method is that it's not live. You can't see the preview as you play with the settings and the numbers. ZBrush does it with array mesh very, very well. So we can cover that in a little bit. We'll definitely cover it when we do some bricks and things like that, or shingles and siding on the side of a house, okay? Anyway, so let's kind of get back to this, right? Okay, so get back to this. So Control D just to duplicate. So again, Maya is kind of taking notes, or maybe ZBrush is taking notes from Maya and vice versa, but if you right click on your mesh, you just basically have your object and component mode. So components are the sub parts of the object, like edges, vertices, faces, UVs. You also have the ability to assign materials near the bottom here. There's a bunch of other kind of little rigging options. So that's just a right click. Control right click. This allows you to switch an object selection. So if I have a face selected, but I want to grab the edges instead, hold Control and say, I want to convert from faces to vertices. I want to convert from vertices, let's say maybe to edges. So it's taking the connected parts or components and allows you to switch between them. So when you have something like a polygon sphere, and you scale this sucker up, right? You know, this is great. So one of the shortcuts here is you grab a polygon, shift, double click the next polygon, and it goes around in a nice clean ring. That's what you get with nice quad-based mesh, is these really quick, easy selection abilities. But one problem is like, how do I grab a bunch of these triangles at once? Well, I can shift click around. There's another way to do that. You can paint the selection by holding tab down. Tab is paint select. Okay, that's one option. If I go to vertex, I can grab the vertex, and remember, I can grab the connected polygons or edges to that. So in this case, I want to go to faces, connected faces or polygons, and it converts to that selection. If I want to grow the selection, shift greater than or shift period. If I want to shrink the selection, shift comma or shift less than. Right? So you can convert between selections. So let's say, yeah. Yep. Yeah, so if let's say I grab this poly over here and I want to expand the selection, it's shift period to expand, or greater than, shift less than, or shift comma to shrink the selection. So that works for vertices as well. By the way, this is kind of funny. You know, if you go to face mode, yeah, what is, I forget how to get that up again. Multi or no? Vertex face, yeah. I used to wonder, why the hell would you want to see your model this way? One good reason is that if you have a weird bug somewhere and you want to find it, this will kind of show you. It literally temporarily, it's not actually splitting these polygons off into separate polys. That's vertex face. What it can do is actually show you where an error might be, because it'll look totally weird and warped if you go to vertex face and you're kind of hunting around for something like, where's that weird kind of polygon or edge? That can be a really, really good way to solve that. Anyways, yeah, so tab, that only really works, I think, in a couple of modes. For sure in face mode. I think in vertex, yeah, it works in vertex, but not in edge, I believe. Oh, it does work in edge too. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, so again, very interesting. So again, this is also a very recent addition to Maya, is if you shift click, right? We can shift click with parallel edges. It can grab a piece, or you just shift click additional parts. And remember, I said if you hold W, if you switch to the move tool, which is W, and then hold shift and move, it'll extrude them out. Now you can see this is a bit of a problem. If I want them to go out facing the direction of the existing polygons, I'm going to undo. And we have another option for this, shift control, hold right click, and we can switch to different axes so that the tool can actually follow along the components, which is the polygons in this case. So now if I hold shift and move, they move in the direction of the surface. Now you can see there's a problem with this slice here, right? It's not quite moving in that direction. The other two are. So if I had like individual polys, and then I do a shift move to extrude, basically, they generally flow with the, right, the faces or the components. But let's say you got a weird strip like this, and we do the shift move. It kind of breaks down in this instance, right? Because this part's just kind of coming out straight. Again, what you can do is hold Control Shift, right click. There's a buried area in here called normal. Now again, this is a bit unfortunate because I think it's only going to move in the direction of the, only with vertices it'll work, but let me go back to component for a minute. You can also just do Control E and extrude, and this will kind of work properly, right? So shift move, shift scale, it works well, and you can kind of change how your axis is controlled via world, via object, or component, which is basically whatever polys are selected or edges. But then Control E is your traditional bevel, which gives you maybe some better results, okay? Sorry, that thing I wanted to show you, though, let's say I convert this to, this only works in vertex selection in this version. I think they've updated this in 2019. So I'm going to convert this to vertices. If I want to move those vertices out, right, in the direction of the normals, instead of having my, so I'm holding Control Shift, instead of setting it to component, this is where you want to go into normal. And you see it gives you this weird little handle. If I click on the end, that's the normal, which is the direction things are facing in. So you can, in fact, grab a bunch of stuff and pull it out. Now, what are normals? Normals basically are telling the software what is the angle from one polygon to the next between the edge in between and the vertex. And if you go to display under polygons, you can see what the vertex normals look like. So these are what normals are, vertex normals. Oops, I think because my object's big, it's hard to see, so I'm going to just increase the vertex normal size. Let's crank it up to like 50. There we go. Right, so you see the normals is really just the direction in which the vertices are kind of pointing out and how the polygons affect that angle. So that's kind of what normals are, okay? A lot of uses. It's kind of like you're seeing the math behind the software, behind the 3D mesh. Okay. So let me just go back to the world axis. So yeah, this is a good question. Let me just go back to display and turn it off for a second. Actually, I'll tear this panel off and then vertex normal. So why is this important? So let's say you do have a Oops, come on. Okay, so I'll turn that off. Now check this mesh out. You see the mesh? Some areas are kind of low poly looking and others are smooth. Under mesh display, we can make low poly objects look smoother than they are, which ZBrush actually doesn't do, via mesh display, soften edge. Okay, actually let me go back. I think I've got some extrusion sitting. Okay, there we go. So this sphere looks smooth, but in actuality, it's not really a smooth mesh. If I go to harden edge, that's technically what the mesh looks like. So what's happening actually, if we take a look at the vertex normals, each vertex has 4 little normals, which is saying, for every polygon connected to me, I'm creating a new sharp edge. And when you go into mesh display, you're cheating. You're not actually adding more mesh or softening or smoothing it. You're just smoothing the normals display. And you see the 4 points become 1. So that's kind of some of the display mathematics that drives the mesh. So sometimes I cheat a lot if I have a film project or whatever and I need to render faster and I have like a million little bolts on a machine, but you never see them in close-up, I'll make them like very, very low poly, 8 polygons, 12 polygons, and I'll just put that soften edge on the whole thing to make it look way softer and smoother than it actually is. So those are like some little tricks you can use to really optimize a scene, okay?
So the softened edge and hardened edge, they do show on render?
Yep. Okay. Yep. So let's say let me turn off the vertex normal again, right? And I don't know if I think I have Arnold activated. Okay, so there it is with soften edge. And I think by default, spheres of a certain resolution over a certain amount automatically soften. And if I go to harden edge, because sometimes you might want that. You might want this to look more like tough, hard and mechanical, right? It'll display differently. And if you hit 3 is actually dividing the mesh twice. So each polygon becomes 4, and then those 4 become another 4, which gives you 16. So I go from however many polygons here, faces, 400 times 4 times 4 would be roughly 6,200 faces. And even though this might be hard edge, right? This is kind of how ZBrush works, is like when you divided them enough, it'll look smooth enough, right? Oh, for some reason, yeah, this is the default render engine will not show a smooth preview. Arnold will, but I'm not going to turn on Arnold for this. Okay, back to some other stuff. So like I said, control is basically your way to adjust or change selection. Shift right click is where you do all your edits. All your edits are basically in here. And this is kind of context sensitive, meaning that face mode has certain tools that edge mode or vertex mode doesn't have. Right, so I can merge faces to center, like so. If I grab, let's say, 4 polys like this, I can shift right click and say, you know what, I want to circularize that. Done. So now I can, control shift right click and set this to component. Oops, looks like I'm actually selecting more than that mesh. So I'm going to shift drag, so I can put like a peg into this thing. And when I hit 3, it's going to smooth out nice. If you want to sharpen an edge, double click your loops. So a lot of times I work with smoothing on. So I work with a lower poly base, and then I'm going to hit smooth. And so we can bevel these, or we can actually, I'll show you 2 ways. There's crease, which is basically ZBrush has a crease-like tool, which makes it look sharper than it is. Okay. Doesn't give you the best shading results, though, I find. So what I often do instead of creasing is I'll actually just bevel it with a couple of segments usually. Okay. So that's one set of tools. The cut tool, super awesome tool, right? So you can cut in unique shapes through your mesh, blah, 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 right? But let's say you just want to add more mesh. Well, hold control. You can add loops through anywhere you have nice continuous parallel edges. Add new loops. If you hold control and shift, it's going to snap to 10-degree increments. If you just hold shift and middle mouse click, shift, middle mouse click. Why aren't you doing it? Middle, oh, geez, what is it doing? Yeah, I don't know why. Okay, well, let me just double click on the tool and find out what's going on here. So if you double click on this tool, what's great about it is it actually shows you all the keyboard shortcuts. So control click, sorry, I was doing shift click. So if you control middle click, you see what it's doing? It's actually adding a loop directly in the middle. Okay. Now, one thing I want you to notice, if you take a look at this, and let me just go back to object mode for a sec. You guys see where I put those loops? You see there's some weird shading in here, right? Maybe you can't quite see, so I'm going to change the material. Oops, come on, get out of here. Got to be in object mode for that, so I'm going to go switch this, maybe assign a...
How did you skip through all the transformation to go to the material? I just saw you do that.
What's that? Here?
No. You know you were in the attribute editor?
Oh, sorry, yeah, so you saw all these edits?
Yeah,
That's the history, right? So if you go into channel box, the shortcut for that is Alt-Shift-D. Wipes the history out.
No. Like you were going through them, but
Yeah.
you skipped all of them, no?
Yeah, I did, but that because look, the history's all here as a tab.
Yeah.
So in the channel box, all these things are basically in the attribute editor. It's just a different layout for the same thing. Alt-Shift-D wipes out the history.
Okay,
So I basically have my main nodes. And then I went to assign assign Blinn. There we go. So I just want to kind of show you guys this with some really shiny material. But yeah, when you have a smooth surface, you see these weird little ripples in the surface. So look what happened. When I add those edges, they actually kind of add them flat in a way. So what do I mean by that? I'll redo. And I'll turn off the smoothing. So what's happening, if you take a look at the profile here, when I added that edge, it actually didn't give it a curvature. Well, there's a fix for that. So if you're going in with the cut tool, right, when I add these loops, there's a little something. So if I go back to the cut tool, check this out, edge flow. So watch the curvature here. So I hold Control, middle mouse click. It puts curvature in to the surface. So you don't get weird flatness when you smooth it later on. So if I have a complex character face and I want to add a loop around the cheekbones, I don't want it to look flat or like it's got a crease. Edge flow will try to recognize the edges beside it and say, oh, there's supposed to be a curvature here, and it puts it in. So same thing if I go across here, Control, middle mouse click and drag. Doing the same thing. Control, middle mouse click and drag. You see it pop out that edge. Before, after. So that's using edge flow. Now sometimes I find the cut tool can be a little bit erratic. So if I'm grabbing an edge like this, you can shift right click and do a connect. Okay. So that connect is actually doing the same thing. It's making it flat. So if you shift right click and go to connect, go into the options, you can say insert with edge flow. And now if I undo redo, you see it pops it in. It pops out the profile. So it keeps the curvature. So when you smooth it, it will not look kind of lumpy, uneven. I think this looks lumpy because I still have some old loops there, but it'll try to maintain that for smoothing and keeping things organic looking. So really, really cool feature. But yeah, most of the time I spend my life in shift right click. So there's cut tool. You can do a sculpt tool like ZBrush style. You can do extrusions. You can do soften harden edges as well. And again, these are somewhat affected by whichever mode you're in, face mode or edge mode. You can smooth faces here. You can affect face normals, but you can do a poke face. So if I do this, let's say do poke face. So it's literally creating triangles that meet in the center. So why would I do that? Poke face, go into face, grab these, shift, move, boom. You get a diamond pattern in your mesh now. I'm going to hit Control D, copy the object. Copy the object, select both objects and combine. I'm going to go into right click face mode, select this face. Now I can shift right click, and in face mode we have a specific function called bridge. So I'm going to apply it multiple times. Apply once, gross. Apply twice. I'm going to switch the option from linear path to smooth path. Apply. Also gross, but maybe we need to add divisions. There you go. Okay. If it's in the wrong direction, you can try to switch it positive or negative. You can change the blend type. So there's 3 types in here. There's actually a third type called curve. So let me undo this. Yep. I'm going to go apply with a curve and increase divisions. Hold on a second. So now if I go back to object mode, let me hit 4 on the keyboard. If you do the third option, which I think is the best, you've got curve points. Curve vertex, curve point. Yeah, I think it's curve vertex. Okay. Curve vertex. With curve vertex, if the archway isn't right, you can literally just grab the points and pull them up. So if the curve isn't quite right, boom, bring it up. Now, I actually will use a Boolean. Now, okay, so what I often like to do, if I'm making some complex shapes, a lot of times like the trim that you build for door frames, picture frames, very elaborate architectural features. So I think about it as if I cut a slicer, like a deli slice, through that trim pattern. So a lot of times I want to be mechanically precise. So this, I think by default, the cylinders are like 2 units high and the box is 1 unit high. So I'm going to set my box and cylinder to be the same height. And I'll explain why in a minute. But so I'll consider this box like the template for this archway. Okay, so I'll take this. So I'm literally kind of thinking about it almost from a top view, right? A trim design. Control D, bring that down. And again, I'm going to keep the heights the same on everything, but I'm just going to scale like so. Okay. And then maybe this thing, I'll take this edge and maybe kind of push it. Again, I'm going to switch this back to just world so I can follow along a clean axis like so. Now I could also add maybe like a bevel in between. So I'm going to go in and just, sorry, not a bevel, but an edge or a connect. So I'm going to just quickly add an edge and then go to bevel. And I believe, do I have the option in here? Sometimes you can actually add options in your tools. There's a little tiny like menu option where you can sort of say, oh, I want to, add with flow or whatever. But in this case, this is fine. I'm going to probably just leave it simple and flat. So very simple, right? Okay, let's go into face mode maybe for this. W, shift drag it out, okay? And then maybe I'll do another little extrusion on this. So shift drag this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually combine these two together, and I'm going to explain why in a second. So I'm going to combine these. I'll take this as my base, shift click on this second. So I usually like to think, what is like my primary main structural piece, and then what's my additional trimming piece? And then I'll go to mesh and Boolean, actually. Hit Boolean. I want to do union. Now you could try subtraction if you wanted, like a difference. You could try that as well. That could work. So let's just keep it at a union. I'm going to make a copy. I always like to make copies of things as I build too. So what am I going to do with this? I'm going to show you a really amazing, simple, completely so stupid it's good cheat. I'm going to literally delete the top polys. Go to edge. And if you double click the edge, it should go cleanly around. Then you simply go to shift right click and fill the object. Now I'm going to take this top. Oops, yeah, Control Shift I flips the selection and delete. Oops, what is going on there? Yeah, I should be able to just delete this. Maybe I'll just try to extrude it first, and then Control Shift I will flip the selection around and delete. That's so weird. I may just delete my history, so Control D to delete history, because sometimes the Boolean history will interfere with your editing. It just deletes history of the whole object.
The object you have selected, not of everything in the scene.
No, not everything in the scene, just of the specific object. So hopefully you guys sort of see what I did. I had a bunch of weird edges and overlapping polys, so I deleted that top stuff, deleted that messy stuff from the Boolean. Then I filled it with one single poly with a bunch of edges, right? I don't care about the internal edges and that they're quad-based or triangles or whatever. And then I actually flip around and delete the rest of the shape. Why do I do this? Well, I'll show you why in a second. Let's go back to object mode. If we go to mesh, mirror, this is my mirror. I'm going to switch this to whichever axis makes sense. So I think in this case it might make sense to go to Z. Flip it this way. Control D to delete history. Go to face mode, shift right click, go to bridge. Bridge options almost always. Remember, I said this with the morning group, I think, but anytime I see an option box, I go for it because usually there's better features in the option box. So let's say with the divisions, it starts at 0, but I say, I'm going to try with like 6. Hit apply. And it's broken. Oh, I think I missed. I must have missed my selection there. So again, we'll try again. Shift right click, bridge. So again, I'm not doing linear. If you do linear with divisions, it kind of does some weird flat thing. Yeah, it should be combined. Hold on. Okay, my apologies. So there was some weird issue with the mesh. Sometimes boolean gets really screwed up, and so my solution was to basically select the, not the polygons, but the actual object. Make sure it's one object, and you just go File, Export Selection as an OBJ. I labeled it this lovely label. And then you just re-import it. So I imported it and deleted the other version that was problematic. So I go to Face, Shift-click both faces. Go to bridge and always go to the options. So if you try linear, it's going to look kind of weird. So you hit apply, gross. Smooth path, apply, okay. But I often find it looks like very shallow, the arc. So I usually will go with smooth path and apply. Now keep in mind, if you want this to just look high res, if you're keeping it inside of Maya, then you want more divisions. So I would just crank up the divisions here, okay? And then I'll just close this. Now, if you take a look, you actually have these two little control points over here that are hovering, and you can pull them up like so. So you get a nice circular arch. Now, how do we get the rest working? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm going to hold Alt-Shift-D to delete history. My mistake, I was saying Control-D. Control-D actually just duplicates the object, but I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-D to delete history. Yeah.
You know, when you show the curve, you can control the vertices. Can
Yep.
you add the vertices like in the middle? Like to do an and or something?
Sure, yeah. I mean, whatever the shape you can come up with will work fine. Now, the other thing, too, is this. If I grab these, you can just pull these straight down, or you can shift extrude them down. Okay? Yeah. So here's something else you can do, which is kind of weird, but kind of amazing. So let's say I want to keep this and repeat it for like a square frame. So watch this. Shift right click. We can duplicate the faces. So I'm not going to do an offset or anything. I'm just going to click. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a separate floating piece like so. Go to Modify, Center, Pivot. And then I usually like to bake the pivot. I'm going to just scale it pretty tall. Now check this out. Edit Mesh, Mirror. Okay. And the axis is usually somewhere in the world, so you can set it to the object if you want. So Object, and we can set it positive, negative, whatever. So right now it's doing this. I don't want it to do that. I'm going to probably do it on Z. And check this out. If I think I have to go into the Rotate tool actually for a second. You want to make sure you have Rotation Snap on, Transform, Snap, Relative, 15 degrees, which is fine. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to re-mirror this again, back into Mesh, Mirror. All right, so just set it to the object's pivot. Select whichever axis makes sense, I think in this case Z, and you can move the mirror around like so, and guess what else we can do? We can rotate. Oops, let me just see here. I think I also have rotation options here too, so I can say rotate plane Z. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any kind of good undo with that. Oops, no, I don't want Z. I'll have to try the other axes. So if you click on the little options, you can rotate on X, Y, or Z. So I'm going to just add them all for now. So let's try 90 degrees this way. No. 90 degrees this way. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, 180, is that right? So yeah, basically what I'm trying to do is kind of get like a corner frame. Oh yeah, I should be doing 45 degrees. Sorry, my bad. 45 degrees. Now it's going to look a little weird until you get to the right point, you know, where the corner makes sense. You don't want it warping because it's pulling away. Okay. So now if I just again delete history, take the edge around here, pull it way the frick over there. Take this, pull it way down. Go to object mode and again go to mesh mirror. And we'll again go to object. And sorry, I think I was on the Z axis and then I'll just pull it over. Rotate it again. Oops. There. 45 degrees. Oops. Sorry, it's kind of jumping on all over the place, but yeah. Okay. Minus 45, yep. Then I'll just pull this kind of down to where it sort of makes sense, okay? So that's that. Alt-Shift-D, delete history. And now you can literally just sort of take faces like so, or actually maybe just these faces. Pull them down, take these, pull them over. Okay?
You're recording, right?
Yep. So that's, you know, different ways to kind of get trim. And remember this, right? Soften, harden. It still is maybe a little bit low res looking here. So what you can actually do is go to mesh display. Instead of making it all soft, you see it kind of blurs the edges around here, which maybe doesn't look good. You can say within a certain range. This is kind of like the polygroup by normal, actually. If you go to soften, harden, anything that's within 30 degrees gets smooth. Anything over that remains sharp. So you get a really, really nice kind of looking curve. So a lot of times I'll literally just start with a straight piece of trim, and then I'll remix it into arcs, archways, frames, borders. Okay? So good sort of ways to, yeah, get your mesh to do whatever the hell you want it to do. So there you go. Yeah, maybe just a few last things. Like I said, there's a lot of tools depending on which mode you're in. One thing I will say is if you are removing edges, so there are times when you build something that's maybe a little too complex. So if I'm double clicking an edge here, let's say here, shift click here. A lot of people do this. They just kind of backspace or maybe delete. Big warning. It leaves behind vertices. So now you've got polygons with more than 4 sides. So if I try to select faces through here, like shift click this, it stops right where that breakage kind of happens. So whenever you take out edges, which is a thing that does happen quite often actually. Let me undo. When you take out edges, hold control, hit backspace. And you see it actually takes the vertices that are associated with that edge with it. I see a lot of students do this. They just were like, oh, I tried to simplify the mesh. I deleted a bunch of edges, but then you left behind hundreds of vertices. It's really difficult to work with, and you may have to like undo or redo your work if you're not saving multiple versions, right?
So it's
Control backspace or control delete, yeah. I actually don't know. I never use control delete, but yeah, basically it does the same thing. Yeah.